Hi everyone, it's Lisa, and we've got two special VIP recipes today. So let's get to it. The first one I wanted to talk about is Larry's Lentil Loaf. And big thanks to Larry Atamanuik. Here he is at work. He's a professional drummer, and he's worked with a bunch of different bands, including Crowbar in the late 60s in my hometown of Hamilton, also C-Train and Linda Ronstadt, Alison Krauss, Dolly Parton, and Emmylou Harris. Some of my favorite people right there. That's pretty cool. And here's Larry at work in his office. He's on stage there. You can see him back in the corner with Alison Krauss and her band at one of Jay Leno's shows in the early 2000s. So this is really amazing. Anyway, Larry's family used to live in Saskatchewan. I didn't realize until I looked this up that Saskatchewan is really big in the area of growing lentils. And it's not just for Canada, but also the world, as they're a major exporter to more than 100 different countries. And here's what they're growing. I mean, they've got green and red lentils. You probably had red lentils before because they're a major ingredient of Indian foods like dal, for example. But they're a really major force on the scene when it comes to this major export crop. So maybe that's one of the reasons why Larry's got an affinity for them. And one of the cool things about this recipe is that it's fairly open, so you can really customize it the way you like it. You can really get creative, as Larry says. So you'll need a cup of lentils, either the canned or dry ones. Here are what the dry ones look like. You'll need a couple of cups of water or vegetable broth if you want to get a little bit fancy, and also 2 or 3 cups of different kinds of vegetables, whatever's available and what you like. I've been using stuff like onions, carrots, and celery. You just chop them up into small bits. And also a cup of oat flour, which they sell in the store, but you can also make it yourself fairly easily just by putting some rolled oats in a blender, and then you pulse it until it gets this fine texture here. So that's fairly straightforward. And I'd suggest using the rolled oats because I use steel cut oats for making oatmeal, but I think they're a little bit hard for this. The rolled oats are a bit softer and they go easier in the blender. So, and also an egg and a half cup of tomato sauce or salsa for a bit more spiciness, and also some cheese. Larry uses mozzarella. I'm pretty sure that you could do this with vegan type cheese substitutes though. And I imagine that grating or crumbling the cheese will really help. So 1/2 to 1.5 cups of grated cheese. So also some seasoning by whatever you like, really. Salt and pepper. Larry's using curry powder, and I use Mediterranean herbs for mine. Corn meat crumbles are something that Larry says that he uses sometimes. And you also need a loaf pan and something to grease it with, or a casserole dish would also work in this situation. Now, if the lentils are dry ones like this, you'll have to pre-soak them. So put them in a bowl and let them soak in water for several hours or overnight, ideally. Larry uses filtered water. I'm just using normal Victoria tap water because the water quality here on the island is fairly good. And you really want to get them softened up. So you drain and rinse these lentils after you've soaked them, and you put them in a pot with a couple more cups of water or vegetable broth, and you bring it up to boiling, and then simmer it for about half an hour until they're cooked. And then you can crush them with a potato masher or in a blender or food processor. The main thing is to break up those individual lentils and make some kind of a paste out of them. And then you can preheat the oven to 350 Fahrenheit, cut up the vegetables and saute them on the stovetop and put in the seasonings with them. Now, since they're going to be going into the oven anyway, you don't really have to cook them all the way, but it's just nice to kind of get them started, and it kind of gives them that nice savory taste as well. So here's what I was doing. I had roasted eggplant, red onion, red sweet pepper, and carrots in mine, and also some chopped fresh celery, and mixed it all together. And then you blend the lentils with the egg, tomato sauce and salsa, vegetables, and oat flour to just thicken up the mixture a bit. And then you can add the optional stuff like the meat crumbles. Now the mixture should be kind of medium texture, so not too liquid, but also not dry. And you can add water or oat flour as you adjust it. If it's too dry or too wet, you can just kind of even it out a bit. So here's what I'm doing. I'm putting the ground oats into the mixture and kind of stirring it around to form a kind of a batter. And then when you're done that, you put a layer of the mixture at the bottom of the loaf pan or the casserole, add some grated cheese, another layer of the mixture, and then more cheese to kind of build it up in layers like that. In this case, I'd actually doubled the recipe because I wanted to make an extra loaf to see if I could freeze it. So here's what I'm doing. I'm just putting the mixture in the pans and then putting in cheese. I probably should have made the cheese a little bit finer. I was kind of in a hurry and also a bit lazy, so I didn't grate it. But you can still do this if you're in a hurry too, and it does work. So you just kind of build up those layers, and then you bake it at 350 Fahrenheit until the loaf holds together. That's about 30 to 45 minutes, I've been finding. And you can tell when it's getting towards done because it begins to kind of contract a bit away from the sides of the pan as it's baking. And also you get kind of a crusty top on the loaf. So that gives you a sign that it's getting towards done when that happens. And you can slice the loaf up and freeze it later on. What I was doing was I was wrapping it up in baking parchment. You can see in the background there in individual portions, and it works really well. You can just heat it up with some rice as a side dish, and that's your dinner. And I was in a situation where I had to pre-cook a bunch of meals, and that was really useful to have this lentil or meatloaf substitute. So anyway, you can see Larry on Tuesdays. He's a regular guest on his son Tony's live stream show, Coffee with Tony. So here's how to find it: twitch.tv/Yaddy That's Tony's channel. And he does his show at 12:30 p.m. Eastern. That's 9:30 a.m. Pacific time. And you can always check Tony's Twitter to see what his latest broadcast schedule is for that. Anyway, now Tony recommends roasting vegetables, and it works really well for this recipe, in fact, is a nice coincidence there. But it's also really good to have around the rest of the time, too, when you're cooking other stuff. So what Tony's been doing is he's been roasting vegetables with seasonings and olive oil. And here he's got from his Patreon channel, he's got cooking hints and recipes up there. So if you subscribe, you can get access to that. He's a really good cook, better than I am for sure. So he's got the vegetables spread out there, and he's got olive oil and herbs on them so they really taste nice when they're finished. His suggestion is you preheat the oven to 400 Fahrenheit, and then you chop up the vegetables. You can do it with carrots and beets like he's got, or zucchini, tomatoes, onions. Bell peppers are nice for this, sweet potatoes and eggplants. All these things can be done. And in fact, you could even use kale. You can make kale into some kind of dried chip-like thing if you use lower temperatures, like 200 to 300 degrees Fahrenheit. So that works too. And if you slice the zucchini about 1/8 of an inch or 3 millimeters thick, that really works well. You can spread it out and it'll kind of cook that way. Other vegetables, you can have them as being like a 1/2 inch thick or more than 1 centimeter thick, and they'll cook too. So once you cut the vegetables up, put them in a bowl. You can use a whole bunch of bowls for different mixtures if you like. Add some salt to your taste, and herbs and spices, so ground pepper or chili flakes, herbs, garlic powder, etc., whatever you like, and you can just mix it around. Add some olive oil and just mix everything with a spoon until it's all coated nicely with that oil. And then you arrange it on baking trays or cookie sheets like in Tony's photo. So if you roast the zucchini and onions and also eggplants and bell peppers, so soft kinds of vegetables, you can roast them at 400 degrees Fahrenheit for about half an hour, and they'll be nicely roasted then. The harder vegetables like carrots and beets may need a bit more time in the oven, and you may have to crank the temperature up a bit on that, but they still turn out pretty well. And you can keep the roasted vegetables in the fridge and use them for other meals for up to a week at a time, or you can freeze them for much longer periods. It's a good way to use up surplus extra produce or stuff that's getting towards expiry date. Maybe looks a little bit unsightly, but once it's roasted, you can't tell. And if you chop things up ahead of time, you can really roast them whenever you've got oven space. If you're cooking for just 1 or 2 people, you often have a shelf in the oven and you feel kind of guilty because, oh, I'm roasting a chicken, but there's this whole empty shelf I'm not using. Well, you can put something else in there and you can do the vegetables at the same time. And so you aren't wasting the oven time if you do that. And here's some roasted eggplant. I tried it myself and I left them in so long, in fact, that they got kind of crunchy, which was really good because I ended up having them on pizza and on salad. And it was really nice. It was good flavor and it was this nice texture as well. Now, one of the reasons why Tony talks about this sort of stuff is realizing that we waste a lot of food in North America. Like just in the US, the amount of food that's thrown out every year by households and by restaurants and hotels could power Switzerland for an entire year. It's pretty mind-boggling. I mean, a lot of the food that gets wasted around the world is in fact fresh produce. And you've probably had a situation where you look in the crisper and you realize, oh, there's a bunch of carrots that, is really good for nothing now. It's been sitting there for like 3 months and it's now just sludge. That's too bad because all the energy that we used to grow those carrots and the water and everything and all the gas to transport the carrots to your home, it's been wasted. So they've realized that they can actually cut back on greenhouse gas emissions and save on energy if they can somehow figure out a way to use this food that's being otherwise wasted. And it says here, 8% of total global greenhouse gas emissions from food waste. If it were a country, it would come in third after the US and China. That's pretty amazing. So here's an example. I mean, my lady gave me a really big onion. That is a real onion with the scale Swiss Army knife next to it. And yeah, I had to have a special knife just to cut the darn thing open. And just me, I couldn't really use the whole thing at one sitting, so I ended up having to cut it up into pieces. And I used Tony's trick to roast the onion, and I used it later on in little portions for like more than a month afterwards. I was able to enjoy it, and I didn't have to throw any of it away. So that was really cool. All right, thanks very much, and have a good day.